SK Vibemaker.
SK Vibemaker. My interviews are hotter. You know we bring through the best special guests. We are not changing tradition anytime soon. And today is all about XXXtentacion's documentary, Look at Me Now. And we have a lot of people in the building that are involved in the documentary. Everyone introduce themselves. Let's start over here.
What's up, y'all? I'm Solomon Sounds, manager of the late, great XXXtentacion, and very happy to be here.
What's happening? My name is Bob Celestin. I was the solicitor for the great and late XXXtentacion. Happy to be here.
My name is Rob Stone. I am founder of Fader Films and the Fader magazine, and we thank Rinse FM for being here and for being a part of XXXtentacion's legacy.
I feel like there's a few different ways in which people say the name. XXXtentacion. That's how I say it. You know what I'm saying? I feel like people kind of say it slightly different ways sometimes.
No, I agree. I feel like there's the way you say it, which is the proper way. Then there's also people say XXXtentacion. Some people call him XXX. Some people call him X. It's like there's literally Ja for the ones that know him close.
Yeah.
You feel me? Jase for his friends and family. But like there was he definitely had his fair share of nicknames. Young Dagger Dick.
Wow.
You feel
Bit
me?
much, yeah, but that.
So Rob, let's start with you, man. What do you think people need to know about this documentary, which is coming out via Fader, which is, you know, a platform that you established, co-founded?
Yeah, thank you. Look, Fader Films got involved because Solomon had the vision to call us and say, I have this young artist. He's getting released from jail. This was 2017. I'd love for you to come down and film him and interview him. And he has a lot going on. It's a complicated story, but we'd love for Fader to present his story. He had gone in pretty much unknown. You know, he was bubbling a little, but he came out, and I believe Look at Me was starting to really take off at the time. And we sat down. We spent, 3-4 days with him. Long interview, in-depth interview in his own words, and then helped him. He was throwing a party, for his fans, and we filmed that. And there were some complications which we could get into of why that film didn't come out. Mm-hmm. But tragically, 14 months later, he was tragically killed, and we had held the footage and hadn't done anything with it. And I reached back out to Bob to Bob first and Solomon, and they had other plans with the documentary, and there were some ups and downs getting to this point. But we waited, and we couldn't be happier that we were able to tell this story together.
Straight. Yeah. Now, Solomon, being part of X's career from the beginning, you know what I'm saying, an illustrious career, an artist on the rise, an artist that was popping, an artist that people were just spanking, that was going to do massive things and done quite a lot in his short career. Now, talk to us about the beginnings of your relationship with X.
The beginnings of our relationship was probably some of my most favorite moments together. Unfortunately, he was locked up, so we would basically spend all day on the phone with each other. His phone privileges would begin, I think, around 10 a.m., so he would basically be able to talk to me from 10 to 2, and then from 2 to 4 he would go on break for lunch, and then from 4 to 9 we're back on the phone call. So I basically had to structure my whole entire life around this time, whether it's the girls I'm dealing with, whether it's the meetings I'm taking on his behalf, even if it's hanging out with my mom. It's going on in between the times where Ja does not have phone privileges. Because during the time when he did have phone privileges, I was basically just doing everything that I could to help get him out of jail, help connect him, we had interviews over the phone, so many different things. There's hours me and Bob would spend on the phone talking about deals, and, the securist lady would go, you have 1 minute remaining, you feel me, while we're talking about closing record deals. So it was such an incredible time in the beginning because all this stuff was happening, and it was happening so fast. And then ultimately, our hard work paid off, and we were able to get him out of jail. And when that happened, it was like a whole new world for us all. And it was really, really, really exciting just to kind of see how much his fans were excited about him, how the impact that he had on people. Because before he got released, I would go to little hole in the wall clubs, little parties, little whatever, and I would hear "Look at Me," and you would see the energy of the kids losing it, going crazy anytime that song came on, or any one of his other songs came on. But it was different when people saw him in real life, and I feel like when people see the documentary, they're going to be able to understand that. They're going to be able to look at fans with their hands shaking and trembling and forgetting to even take the picture with him because they're so excited. So that was just beautiful to see, from just working with him in the beginning to doing all this other stuff to helping him get out. That was probably one of the happiest days of my life, next to watching my daughter being born, is watching him come home, for sure.
So did you actually start managing him while he was locked up?
Yes, I did.
How does that happen, man?
Well, to be honest, I was, in the music business trying to make my ways. Bob Celestine here was a wonderful mentor to me and would always give me information. So when I felt like I had something that was meaningful, something that could be big, there was nobody else in the world that I wanted to work with besides Bob, because Bob was the guy that would take my phone calls when I had nothing to offer him. So when I felt like I finally had something to offer, I wanted to give that back to Bob, because I was so grateful for him. Because before that, there was nobody that was willing to give me information or help me, no matter how smart I was or no matter how bad I wanted to be in the business. So, I was very grateful to Bob to help me, because Bob was almost my validation in a way. I didn't really do anything crazy before X. So having Bob kind of was like, that was kind of like my big homie at the time, to kind of make it like, okay, so I say Solomon's okay, I'm a lawyer, I know how this shit go. You feel me? So it's like, that was amazing to have Bob there, and I think it made a world of difference. To this day, he's like my dad. We're so close. You feel me? Like, seriously, we're mad close. We've built incredible relationships, and that's one of the most beautiful things about X. He brought so many people together, and those relationships that are here and that have forged over him are relationships that are gonna last a lifetime.
But didn't you sign him through the glass?
Oh, I did.
So
I did.
You should tell that story.
So basically, I went down to Florida. It was actually me and my man Orlando Wharton, because at the time we were thinking about signing to Atlantic, and he was at A&R at Atlantic. So we both went down to go see him. And at the time, me and him was talking every day, but we never had met face to face. And I brought my management contract down. We actually wrote it together on the phone. It was the worst management contract ever, but we did it together. It was one page. So I went down there with Orlando, and I remember, it being so much hassle to go see him, and then they finally bring us to go see him, and I'm thinking, oh shit, we're gonna get to see him, but then they bring us to this little room, and there's a glass there, so I'm thinking, damn, I guess I get to see him through the glass. So I see him, and I was kind of shocked, because he was small. His stature was small, but I kind of expected him to be like a giant. I don't know, maybe it's because of his personality or just because of how his conviction and his voice or how crazy, whatever the case may be. But in my mind, he was a giant. So when I saw him, and he was like just a kid with these big brown eyes, and he's just like, no homo, made me fall in love with him. To be like, yo, I got you. I'm gonna save you. I'm gonna be there for you. Because when I saw him, you just saw somebody that was vulnerable. So I took the last $100 that I had in my wallet. I gave it to a security guard, and I was like, yo, please make him sign this for me. And the security guard took my $100 and brought me back a signed management contract. And that was the beginning of the first day of the rest of my life.
So Bob, being a solicitor, the lawyer, I'm sure you had to look over a few of those contracts. So kind of talk to us about your role in XXXtentacion's career, because contrary to popular belief, most successful artists definitely have a good lawyer or solicitor.
Well, listen, it's really funny how I even got connected with him. And it was through Solomon. So as you can see, you get a sense of his energy, right? So as he said, he would call me from time to time, and he'd come to my office, and I'd give him advice. I'm a black attorney, so at the end of the day, I feel like it's part of my calling to help young brothers and sisters, get into the game, right? So one day I come to my office, and my assistant is saying, "You got to call Solomon. He got 4 or 5 messages. He's been calling you like crazy." And he didn't have my cell phone at the time, so I finally get him on the phone. Before I could say anything, he's like, "Bob, listen, I got this artist. He's blowing out of South Florida. Obviously, he's going to be the hottest thing. You have to represent him. You have to represent him." He said that like 3 times. "You have to represent him." I'm like, "Well, what's his name?" XXX. I said, "What? X what?" I said, "I don't do porn, bro. I don't do porn." No, he's a rapper. XXXtentacion. I said, "Oh, man." He said, "Go to SoundCloud. Go to SoundCloud." So I go to SoundCloud on my computer. Listen to this record. Look at me. So I'm, old school. I've been doing this for a while. So I'm listening to the record. I'm like, it's not even mixed, right? It just wasn't. It was like distorted and everything like this. But I felt the energy of it. Anyway, long story short, he's like, you gotta represent this kid. And what was really so funny, he tells me, he says, I have to tell you one thing. I said, what? He's in jail. I said, he's in jail? How's this gonna work? Right? So it always made me laugh because when he was talking about the time periods that he had the time, he said, Bob, listen, you gotta be in your office 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, he's gonna call. I'm like, are you sure? Yes. So 6 o'clock, sure enough, I have X on the phone. So we're going over, we had these offers from different labels. So I'm trying to go over these deals with him and say, hey, these are the pros and cons. And he's smart. He's a smart kid because he's asking the right questions. What about this? What about that? What about this? And then all of a sudden, a voice. 1 minute left on a phone call. And then mid-sentence, the phone shuts off. And then Solomon calls back. Pop, don't leave the office. Stay in the office. He's going to call back. He's going to call back. So it's 8 o'clock. I said, you're lucky I wasn't married. I didn't have any kids, right? Because I just waited in the office. And sure enough, like 8:30, get back on the phone. And we're going through these deals and the whole nine. So it was really the first time I met him. I go to Florida. Me and him, we're in the same hotel room. He says, Bob, you got to come to Florida because you have to go talk to the judge and tell the judge he has a record deal because we were trying to get him out on bail. And then I meet him, and he's in the, yellow jumpsuit, and he's in shackles. And I was like, whoa. And he comes and says, I said, I'm Bob, I'm your lawyer. He's like, nice to meet you. You know what I mean? It's like really small, unassuming, and I'm like, wow, all of this energy coming from this, like, small guy, you know what I mean? So it was really, really interesting. But the thing that struck me about him was his intelligence as an artist. I've represented a number of artists, and for the most part, they're only concerned about, okay, how much money am I getting at the end of the deal, right? And he was the first one. We had some deals that were offering, potentially $1 million deals, and he decided to take a deal with a smaller, at the time, up-and-coming independent label called Empire Distribution. Shout out to Ghazi, right? And the reason why was because, Empire offered him, control of his masters, control of his intellectual property, full creative freedom. It wasn't a lot of money, but to his credit, and he and I were making bets. All right, it's probably going to be, there were like 2 other labels, major labels. He's going to definitely pick this other label because they're going to pay him this amount of money. And sure enough, got on the phone with him. He says, I want to go with Empire. I said, you sure? I said, yeah, I want to do Empire. And so we went with Empire, and the rest of it, they say, is history.
All right, Bob, I want to touch on something that you just mentioned there, because a lot of artists, they don't actually understand this. Owning your IP and owning your masters and taking a smaller, upfront fee, smaller label deal, as opposed to signing a massive record deal. You might sign a deal that maybe they might sign you for 3 to 5 million, but you don't own your IP and you don't own your masters. Kind of break down the differences.
At the end of the day, you have to, as an attorney, you have to take each client from where they're coming from. Right? Some clients are coming and they're coming from really, financially destitute situations. They really need the money. So I don't want to knock them and say they did the wrong choice, especially if they're smart with how they use the money, right? But for those artists who are willing to take a second and say, you know what? Yeah, I can get this immediate gratification, but if I wait a little longer and I can own and control my creative, my work of art, right? That's the better way to go, right? So it all depends on your situation. But if you can hold on and maintain control and ownership of your IP, I can tell you that, part of my job and Solomon's job, and we have to also make sure we point out Cleopatra Bernard, his mom, our job is to maintain his legacy. And because he made those wise choices early on, we've been able to extend his legacy, create a foundation to help people, and make sure that his estate, his family, his mom, everybody is doing very, very well financially. So shout out to Ja for that.
Explain to upcoming artists why, though, owning your IP and your masters is important.
Because at the end of the day, by owning them, now you have something that you can sell down the road, right? It's the difference between you're getting a percentage that somebody else owns it versus you own it, and now you're in a position where you can trade it, sell it, take a loan against it. And that's where the real power comes in, because through ownership, you have a greater piece of the profit and a greater piece of the pie. So all you artists out there, listen to SK. If you have the opportunity to own your shit, own your shit.
Own it.
Own it.
And that's why Bob is one of the best attorneys in the U.S.
They're so kind.
I'm serious in the music business because of his honesty, but his ability to explain the difference between deals and understand the artist's position. So kudos to you, Bob.
Appreciate that.
So let's talk about the fact that a lot of people would say that X is a rapper because he's black. That was said in the documentary. If you listen to his music, you can easily understand that if he was white, they maybe might not be calling him a rapper. How fair do you think that statement is?
I think that is probably the best question that I've ever got in any interview about X ever. Because the honest to God truth is he wasn't a rapper. He could rap. He could rap circles around. However, he was not a rapper. That was the title, as eloquently as you said it, that was given to him because he was black and because he did sometimes rap. But in the same space, he would sing, he would make hardcore rock music, he would make alternative, he would make emo, he would do all these different genres. There's
even some country in there.
Exactly.
He was genreless.
So that was a big thing for him. He wanted to blur the genre lines. So, and he even said it in the documentary, is he kind of wanted to be, you know, almost a unanimous artist for his fans, where it's like they can come to him for whatever type of music that they wanted, and he would try to make it. And he did these things so naturally and so authentic because, you know, he grew up with a wide range of music. He grew up in a house with his mom, Cleo. Cleo's probably playing all the Jamaican classics, all the Barrington Levy's, all the Bob Marleys, all those crazy things.
His dad was a Rasta, innit?
Yes, he was. And then he also had his aunt, Deandra, who would school him on things like Korn and all these rock bands and
Kurt Cobain
and all these things that, you know, really helped round out his musical taste. So as he was growing up, of course, he's getting involved in hip hop. People are rapping around him, but he has this incredible music history, this knowledge of music, this library of music, to where now when he's making his own records, there's so much things to choose from. And this is the time where streaming is kind of blowing up for real. So it's like now you can kind of get all this music, and it's not just like, oh, black people have to listen to this music, white people have to listen to this music. It's more of an open appetite for whatever it is that you want to hear, and he knew that very well and took full advantage of it.
There's a moment in the doc, and it's indescribable. Like, you need to see it, but where he plays his members only guys, him singing after they just knew him as rapping.
That was his early collective that he had.
Right, and they're sitting in the room, and you can, like, they're all kind of stunned, like, you made this record? Like, and it really is a special moment. And you as a viewer and someone who didn't know X, you realized how special as an artist he was for me at that moment, and how comfortable he was with himself, or maybe, you know, that he knew he had to get out of his comfort zone, which is, at that age, to be able to do that and have the confidence, I thought was amazing. And then to pull it off where he wasn't trying to do it, that was something he was meant to do. Like, you felt it in that scene. Facts.
Now, Rob, we're going to steer off course a little bit. Like, anyone who knows you founded the massive platform Fader.
Thank you.
Part of Arista in the mid-90s with Clive Davis,
Yes.
which saw the rise of Bad Boy Records, you know, Puffy, Biggie, Craig Mack. And before we started this conversation, you just showed me a whole archive of pictures of you and Biggie, and like some memorabilia that nobody could have unless they was right beside Biggie. So tell me about some of those Biggie stories, man, some of the time you spent with him.
Man, I mean, we might have to make a movie about that together. But he was one of one. He was, you know, one of my favorite artists. But he was a good person, you know. And it taught me a lot about life, being on the road with him and knowing him before he blew up was incredible. But, you know, like, people ask how special was he. And I just remember, like, when you go to a radio station, they give you, you know, you do your interview and you talk about your music, and then they give you, like, the call sheet of all the DJs, and, you know, you read off, hey, this is, you know, Biggie Smalls, I'm here with Big Von at KML in San Francisco, and you read through 30 of them. Artists have to do them over and over again because they just couldn't do them right. He would look at it, and he had his lazy eye. I just remember him looking at it, and he would nail like, his mind.
One take.
Boom,
That's how we used to record as well, innit?
Yeah. Just like, and they sounded cool. They just were like the coolest things you heard said, and then radio stations used them. But he never had to do a second take on anything, which was amazing to me because I saw artists struggle with saying things, and he would just flow through it. And I don't know if it was like this Brooklyn cool that he just always was very comfortable with himself. But you know, tragically, his life passed, and I think being around that family and seeing the pain and the suffering that it caused, it did help me in this situation, you know, 25 years later, and how to deal with telling a story like this. But those were special times. Puffy, you know, one of one, and just like, you know, a very unique time in music to be around.
And
that.
a misunderstood character as well.
Absolutely, yes.
I want to tell you a funny story. You might not know this, but I ran a company called Uptown Records with Andre Harrell, right? And at the time, Puffy was an intern that ultimately became the youngest A&R, VP of A&R of Uptown Records. And Biggie was supposed to be signed to Uptown Records. But what happened was, this is something we'll do a movie about also, but ultimately, at the end of the day, Andre had to fire Puffy. And so Puff took Biggie to Clive and ultimately ended up doing a deal, like a venture with Arista Records, and the rest of they say is history. But originally, he was going to be an Uptown Records artist.
Crazy.
Very much so.
Those that know.
And this is crazy. When I went, the first time I took Biggie to the West Coast, we get in the car, and he wasn't well known. And we're sitting in the car, and it's me, Lil Caesar's in the back, I'm driving, and it was the Big Mac tour. And Hawk Burns was with us, who was the road manager, and Biggie's sitting next to me. I rented like a big Lincoln Continental, so he didn't have to ride with like 12, 15 of us in a van. So he came in the car with me. And we're talking, like, there's no conversation in the car. I'm like the record rep, and it's a little awkward. I'm 26, he's 21 or whatever it was. And I said, I saw you perform in New York. And I just remember him looking over at me, and I said, he's like, where at? And I was like, little, you know, West 12th. And he's like, that was my first show I ever did. So it was like, I scored instant credibility, but it was like a historic moment when he got on stage. Like, it was a different energy I've ever seen. Perform with Black Moon, Smith & Wesson, and when Biggie took the stage, it just like this little club, it's almost like the roof could have blown off because of the energy in there. Redman was walking through the club with like a baseball bat over his shoulder and a hood up. This is like early 90s hip hop.
So you're telling me you was at the Notorious B.I.G.'s first ever show in New York?
In New York City.
With
yes.
Black Moon.
Yep. Smith & Wesson.
Redman was there.
Redman was there with an aluminum baseball bat over his shoulder, walking through the crowd.
So what? This must be what, 92, 93?
It was probably 93. And Flex was DJing.
So tell me about this show, man. Like, what was it like when you jumped on stage? Because a lot of times artists perform for the first time, early shows, and they're not very good.
So,
to be honest.
No, it's a good point. One of the guys, there was a guy, Finsta Baby, who did not do well at that show, but Buckshot commanded the stage. You could tell Buck was special. And then when Big took stage, it felt like half the crowd went on stage with him. And then, you know, he was doing his rhyme, and he literally was like, Biggie Smalls, a rap genius. I keep the Glock by the penis. And then a fight broke out. Gunshots. Flex is like, everybody get down, everybody get down. And there was one entrance and exit, one door, and everybody kind of just swirled around in the club and got out. But that was his first show.
Crazy.
So, yeah, it was crazy.
You heard it here, man.
Was that the tunnel?
No, it was a tiny club, like the size of this room, Little West 12. It was tiny. It was in the meatpacking district. Yeah.
Did they even pay for him to perform that night?
No, I'm sure he was.
You done that for free?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. But yeah, to be able to tell him I was at that show and have him go, that was my first show.
Instant credibility.
It was a good moment. Yeah.
So let's talk about managing XXXtentacion, the chaotic figure, the mental health issues, the complicated figure. Both Solomon and Bob, you could, give insights on this.
I would say, although there was times that was like a little tumultuous, it was the best experience ever, because I'm not like, let's be honest, he was a wild guy, but it gave me all the chops I needed to be the best manager I could possibly be. It was like, there's no sleeping on the job here. Anything could happen at any given second. You got to be on top of everything. You feel me? And then X didn't play no bullshit. He knew like I said, he was a man on a mission. And if you wasn't on the mission, you had to get out the way. So for me, I was just doing my best to make sure I was keeping pace with him. And
Yeah, on my end, the other thing that people don't really know about X is that he's a very smart young man, right? So he's one of the few artists that I could actually have a conversation with and give him a contract, and he'd ask me, well, what does this mean? What does this paragraph mean? Most clients would be like, all right, oh, where's the part about the money? Oh, this is how much I'm getting? All right, let me sign it and be out. And literally, I've had to sit, no, you got to sit down and read this, because I don't want you talking about down the road, I don't know what I signed. It was easy with him. He would really just go and be, all right, what's this? What's this? What's this? And on the business aspects of it, we did some incredible deals, right? And again, it was because I could have a real honest dialogue with him. And we would clash heads sometimes. And when there was a deal, I'm like, bro, you really need to do this deal. Oh man, I don't know if I want to do it. Da, da, da. So then shout out to his mom, Cleopatra Bernard, because she was like, kind of like, we were on the same side. I'm like, listen, Cleo, I think he needs to do this. Da, 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 da. He's over there. And then she'd go talk to him and like, all right, Bob, I think I want to do the deal. He wouldn't tell me that he spoke to his mom, right? He wouldn't tell me that. But I knew that I was like, all right, because Cleo got involved, we were able to do it, right? So from that perspective, it was great. The other thing too is like kept me on my toes, because every other day I'm getting a call from Solomon, Bob, you got to do this. Send a letter out to here. Send a letter out to this. Or you got to come to Florida. Like, I'm not a criminal attorney. I'm an entertainment attorney. But I learned a lot about criminal law in Florida, dealing with John and Solomon. And, I don't rarely ever wear a suit. He got me wearing a suit more often than I would enjoy doing. We'll go down to Florida. So it was really, it was like, go, 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 go. He clearly took my attention. Luckily I have other lawyers that work for me so they can handle some of my other clients. But from the perspective, but he knew what he wanted from the business perspective. That's one thing. He knew what he wanted. We did some major, major deals, and it was definitely, a very, kept you, like, if I was married, I'd be divorced by now. There's no question about that. I would have been divorced. My kids would be like, what? You know what I'm saying?
The amount of time
where's
you
my
spent.
daddy? Like, he would, so luckily for him, didn't have kids. I wasn't married, still not. And, I was able to be there for him when he needed,
Over the last few years, we have seen so many rappers murdered. This year, we've seen PNB Rock, we've seen Takeoff, we've seen, over the last few years, we've seen Nipsey Hussle, we've seen Pop Smoke, we've seen King Von, and of course, we've seen XXXtentacion. These are artists that have been murdered. I mean, I really have debates about the emphasis on security, but how do we feel like this is gonna, how are we gonna stop this stuff, man? I mean, there's one thing that's the music, and there's another thing which is real life.
So I have the unfortunate distinction of having represented X. I also represented Pop Smoke, and he died, right? So the thing that you have to understand is it's easy for people to put a label. It's all rappers, rappers, rappers. They just happen to be rappers, right? X didn't die because he was writing a song about gangs or whatever. He died because he was robbed. Similarly to Pop, P&B Rock. Like, it's very, Takeoff was an accident of a dispute that was going on. It wasn't because they were rappers per se. And that's something that, you have to make that distinction to make sure that the whole art form or the genre doesn't get painted as like, oh my God, the music itself is causing all of this, because it's not, right? But the security situation is a very, very important thing to understand. And at least in X's mind, he felt that he wanted to be normal. He's like, no, I'm a regular guy. And it was like, bro, really you're not, right? You got, half your hair is yellow. You got, you're driving a fancy car or whatever. You're really not regular. You're not like everyone else. And so at the end of the day, a lot of these artists have to understand that once they reach a certain level of success, they are not like everyone else. And unfortunately, there's a bunch of folks that instead of being inspired and say, oh wow, he got to where he is, let me aspire to be like him. And I'm sure there are a lot of kids that are. There's a subsection of folks that are like, oh, you got something that I want, instead of me working for it, I'm just gonna take it from you. So to be honest, like the security, even with Pop, it was like, hey man, we're gonna put you in a hotel. I want to do an Airbnb. I'll get the hotel. So he himself went on the app and got the Airbnb. And so what happened, the narrative was like, oh, the record label did it or the managers didn't do it. He was a grown man. Like at the end of the day, we got you the hotel. Come to the hotel. You go and decide that you want to go to Airbnb, and then unfortunately you advertise where you are, then the rest of the stays history, right? So it's important that people know that it's not hip hop itself. It's just unfortunate like you have these individuals that are very successful, and we come from communities that aren't as successful, and some subsections of that community would rather take from you than actually go out there and get it themselves. And that is unfortunate.
Thank you very much, guys. They say my interviews are hotter. SK Vibemaker, XXXtentacion documentary, Look at Me. Where they going to find it again, Rob?
Altavad.com, both films.
SK Vibemaker.